using these assumptions from Malcolm Knowles about adult learners. Program planning models, this program planning model attends to, for example, making the adult classroom a place suitable for adults, both physically and psychologically, so that they can be put in the mood, they can be motivated to learn. So the arrangement, for example, physical arrangement of the classroom, to show that there is no one who is better than the other or who is higher than the other, including the facilitator, him or herself. There is a way it psychologically prepares the adult to feel comfortable and also motivated to learn. Since adults direct their lives in family, work, and other arenas, they can also direct their own learning by, first of all, taking the decision on what to learn and when to learn it. Of course, according to the principles, one of the principles is that adults will only learn when they are ready and when they need that information or the learning for immediate application. Adults do not have time. Most of the adults, well, not all of them, but most of the adults are not ready to come and learn to keep the information for use in years to come. They have problems that need solutions, so they will go to learn how to solve the solutions. So that also explains the when they are interested in learning. They will learn when they want to solve a problem. They will learn when they have a challenge for which they need to get information that can help them to go over the challenge. But they also can decide the what to learn, or specifically what. So if I need to learn how to count my money, don't teach me how to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want you to count to teach me to count 1,000 plus 1,000 equals 2,000. Not 1 plus 3 equals to 4. Then 200 plus 1 equals to 201. Because we know that in our currency we do not have a 1 shilling. So don't tell me about 201 shilling or 201. It should be 210,000 or 201,000, which I am going to tomorrow use in counting my money in the bank. So the what, exactly what, is important here. You do not take me into the concepts. I want you to give me the product. The competencies are the ones that I want. So the adult may demand that, but of course an adult also may want to learn a bit of concepts, and just some may want to know, okay, 100 plus 100 equals 200,000. Where does this come from as a concept? If that is what they want, then you go there, but you do not determine for them, for example. So those are some principles to show the characteristics of the adult, so that you are patient, you go slow, you do not take that king's chair as a facilitator to determine what you give to the adults, how you deliver it to them without finding out what exactly they want as adults. So in so doing, andragogy helps us to give us the character of adults, so that if we apply those principles, we may actually be able to attract the adults to do their learning comfortably and also efficiently. So now we move on to self-directed learning. And as I've mentioned, self-directed learning appeared around the same time that Knowles introduced andragogy. And you will, of course, some of you will be reminded, and while others will discover that actually self-directed learning, it comes from one of the principles. Self-directed learning as a model comes from one of the principles of andragogy, which says that adults are self-directed. And so that is where this was picked up very quickly around that time when the principles had come in. And then it was picked up and turned into, expanded into a model that is independent of andragogy as a set of principles. So self-directed learning is the second major adult learning theory that helps us to further distinguish adult learners from children. And yes, the first assumption of andragogy, that as a person matures, they become more independent, self-directing, is the one that gave birth to this theory. So the push for self-directed learning here becoming a major theory of its own came from Alan Tuff. That I mentioned. So Alan Tuff is the adult educator that is associated with self-directed learning. And you see that while the other one came up in the late 1960s, this one is coming in the early 19. It is actually around the 1969, 70 there. And now the Alan Tuff's publication of 1971 was just a research to now ground the theory and give its justification as a theory. So this research came into this to emphasize the self-planned learning projects among the Canadian adult learners. And in this research, Alan Tuff found that 90% of his participants in the research had engaged in an average of 100 hours of self-planned learning projects the previous year. And this learning was deeply embedded in their everyday lives, self-planned, and also infused in their everyday life. You know, this also speaks to the fact that the adults want to learn things that they will apply as they continue to learn and become experienced in what they have learned and what they are applying. So the key to understanding self-directed learning is to recognize that self-directed learning does not mean sitting in a classroom alone as an independent learner and doing things independent of the others and learning in a vacuum. No, it actually means the learner taking control of his or her own learning. Even the beauty is that we have a class that has several people, more than 5. You are about 5 or 6. So it doesn't mean that everyone should go and learn in their own way, independent of the others. But just that each one of you as a learner, as an adult learner, to just be in control, to just take charge of your learning. You may be learning the same things. Of course, on this program, you will have to learn the same things that you'll be facilitated in. But then at what point do you learn it? You cannot learn all the things at the same time in the same way. Some of you may want to sit in the library. Others may want to be home. Others may just want to be in the classroom and do revision, while others may want to discuss, to have discussions with others, collaborative learning. But in the end, you are learning the same things, only that each one of you is in control, is in charge, can determine the how and probably when, at what particular point am I going to do my study. One may wake up in the night, deep in the night at 3 a.m. Another may say, no, for me, I will do my study before I go to bed. Another will want to wake up very early in the morning around 7 and do their study up to 10 a.m. and then do other things. So that is what self-directed learning actually entails: control by the learner on what they learn, how they learn, when they learn it. So there is quite an amount of literature that contains numerous models of the process, sample learner contracts, and assessment tools that measure the extent of the learner's self-directedness, in a bid to try to understand this theory and how it works, or how it speaks to learning that adults go through. So first foundational theory or model, that is andragogy, is associated with Malcolm Knowles' self-directed learning, which draws on andragogy, and one of the principles there is associated with Alan Tuff. And now we come to transformative learning, which is associated to Jacques Mézières. Transformative learning, on its part, focuses on the cognitive process of making meaning. And we are going to see what happens. So it is to do with the psyche. It is to do with the psyche, but because adults have a certain way of processing their own information in their own way, at their own time, depending on the situation. So this one also has a bit of context and how it affects the learning of adults. But it comes from the cognitive or the psychic processes that happen in the mind of an adult. So this type of learning is considered an adult learning theory because transformative learning is dependent on adult life experiences and a more mature level of cognitive functioning than what is found in childhood. A child will, in most cases, wait to be explained to, and children indeed ask so many questions out of curiosity because they do not know. But then adults will process information based on experience in most cases. So Jacques Mézières, who studied the experiences of women returning to college, is the architect of this theory. So we see andragogy coming in the 1960s, late 1960s. Then we see self-directed learning coming in the early 1970s, and now transformative learning coming in towards the late or the end of the 1970s. So within one decade is where we see these foundational theories coming in. Now, you see that the adult and community education field as a profession is quite still young. It's still quite young and a little bit virgin. I don't know whether virginity can be a little bit or much. But these years as Ugandans, we can even relate them to events that we have studied, that we talk about. By 1968, 1969, we already had our independence. I'm sure even Nigeria also had its independence. So these are years that we also had Africans also taking charge of themselves. And we see that these are the years when the adult education discourse and field began to develop. So when we talk 1978, we are only talking at the time when Amin was on his way out of Uganda, or Ugandan politics. And this is very close to our current president, who actually at this time he was already active in politics. So we are talking about a time that is not really very far away. Because by 1980 he was even participating, just 2 years after transformative learning research starting. Our current president was going to the bush to start fighting for what he's enjoying right now. Probably you also went through some experiential learning before you went to the bush. So since his early contribution, that is Jacques Mézières, many frameworks, definitions, and theories have been proposed. So according to transformative learning, learning in adulthood is often more than just adding information. But this information is processed. Excuse me. The information is processed. Actually, the information is got and it is reflected on, and it generates new thinking which leads to a different type of action from the one that generated the initial information. And we are going to look at all these things a little deeper. But what we are doing now is just to do an overview, to just have a glimpse into these theories. So transformative learning is also about making sense of our experience, yes, reflecting, which can result in a change in a belief, attitude, or perspective, meaning it also influences how we act the next time we act. So there is expected to be a perspective transformation during this transformative learning. There has to be perspective transformation. And whenever I reach this point of the sharing, I always remember some of the issues or situations that I went through, which can be related to transformative learning. In 2009, I was still a young man. I was not married. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have children. So I was coming from Mbarara. Okay, before that incident, when I had just bought my car, I first bought my first car in 2008. So I went to Jinja to see a friend. And when I was returning, I wanted to test the speedometer to see whether the Japanese were serious when they put it at 180 as the highest speed. So I wanted to see whether that speedometer would go up to 180. So when I reached Mabira, that was a very good time and space for me to test. It was very early in the morning, no traffic police. Those days the road was very good, no potholes in Mabira. You could see where you were going about 3 or 4 kilometers ahead or even more. And so I stepped on the accelerator properly. And the thing was going down, and it had reached 170. Just 10 more speed, and I would be done with it. But then I realized maybe this may not be a very good thing for me to do. I think I have proved enough, because the thing was still continuing. So I just talked to myself and said, okay, yeah, I think they are right. If you really decided, you can take it up to 180. So I have always been a fast driver. Now, a few months later, I was coming from Mbarara. And when I reached Mpigi, there is a forest there in Mpigi. So I really wanted to overtake several cars, because I knew, and I thought I was a very smart driver. I could not just collide. In fact, when I went for driving lessons, I even got, I did defensive driving. I even have a certificate. So I thought I am sober. Now, I overturned the car. Good enough, I was not hurt. But 1 year later, when I got married and started having children, each time I drive and I see the speedometer going to 140, I start reflecting on what happened in Impigi, and then processing what could happen now. I may not be as lucky as I was in Impigi when I overturned and the car went into the forest. And I start thinking of my wife who would become a widow, my children who would become orphans. I don't know how they would survive without me. And I just process the information and just take it back to either 100 or even below 100. And I drive there and say, okay, I will reach when I reach. It is well. What happened to me in Impigi was a perspective transformation of the perspective that I had transferred from Mabira and taken to Impigi, and had that experience of overturning the car. Now in Mabira I went to 170. In Impigi I was at 140, the car overturned. So each time I reach 140, I remember, this is the speed at which I have ever overturned a car. So to me, that was a perspective transformation. Nobody sat me down to tell me, please never drive as fast. Nobody. It is me who sat down, reflected, and now my actions when I'm driving are different. I don't even need someone to tell me drive slowly. I know. So that is what transformative learning is supposed to do. So Meziro's 2010 step transformational learning process frames much of today's research in transformative learning and, of course, adult learning. So the process usually is initiated through a sudden or drastic experience, what is called a disorienting dilemma in Meziro's terms, and wherein adults are challenged to examine the assumptions, the beliefs that have guided the meaning making which they had in the past, but now are no longer adequate. Now, the dramatic experience I had was overturning the car. Why did I overturn the car? Because I had already driven this car up to 170 and I was even continuing. So I thought, no, it is okay. It is okay. Now, those are the beliefs that guided my meaning making from the Mabira testing, which was in the past. Now, at this sudden experience that I had to get now a new perspective, because it qualified all the beliefs that I had before about driving fast and being steady, that they were no longer adequate. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't under the influence of anything, nothing, but the car overturned. So the assumptions that I had before were no longer adequate to explain safety on the road and avoiding accidents or not overturning the car. So now I realize that any speed above 100, anything can happen, even when it is below 100. So perspective transformation occurred, and it occurs because the earlier assumptions, earlier beliefs, earlier motivations or whatever they are no longer qualifying, they are no longer justifiable, they are no longer appropriate. And of course, this also explains that situations change, contexts change. So even if right now I wanted to go back to Mabira and just try to drive at 160, you can be sure that the car will overturn even at 140. Why? Because the potholes are so many in Mabira now. So the situation, the context has changed even in Mabira. So what I had in 2009 can no longer work. It is inadequate. So the perspective has to change. So while Meziro focused on personal individual transformation, he readily acknowledged the influence of Paulo Freire, who wrote of the transformational learning to address oppression and bringing about social change. So when we talk about transformative learning, apart from Meziro as the promoter of this theory, we see that he also acknowledged the transformational learning assumptions and discussions from Paulo Freire, who was also looking at transformation from the point of liberation, liberation from oppression that was by the oppressors against the oppressed. And in this liberation, the transformation is only taken to be transformational when the oppressed look at liberating not only themselves, but also liberating their oppressors. So it is an overhaul of liberation. And that is how Paulo Freire was looking at transformational learning. So Paulo Freire was talking transformational learning, while Meziro is talking of transformative learning as a theory. And Paulo Freire was taking it as an approach, while Freire was framing transformative learning theory. The other one was transformational learning approach. Well, we shall get to understand this better a little later. So currently, transformative learning is probably the most researched and studied area in adult learning theory, according to the amount of literature that we see. And even as we are going to you can do a quick search and see that actually transformative learning has quite a lot of literature and a lot of research that has been conducted. I don't know, maybe it is impressive or more appropriate or very frequent in the lives of adults as they learn. So there are hundreds of articles, chapters which are just devoted to transformative education, transformative learning, and there have been several conferences on transformative learning. And actually most of the current publications, you'll see that most of the current publications in adult learning are in most cases and mostly on transformative learning. So if you are looking for most current 2013, 2014 research in adult learning, in most cases you'll find several which are referring to transformative learning as a theory, informing those studies. So